name is Lou Coppola. My date of birth is May 25th, 1937. And my parents were Lou. I'm actually a junior, although I've dropped it many years ago, and my mother's name was Mary. So Lou and Mary Coppola. I was the oldest of 3 children. My name, Lou. My brother's name was Frank. He was 4 years younger than me. And our sister is Francine, and she was 4 years younger than Frank. So we were spaced evenly apart, 4 years apart. We grew up in a city called Bridgeport, Connecticut, and we all attended the same grade school. In those days, we were a small city, and we were all very, very tight. When I was young, I say young, 8, 9, 10 years old, I was interested in perhaps only one thing, and that was sports. I loved my baseball, football, basketball, whatever, but I was a kid. My father, he's blue collar. He was also a banjo player and mandolin player. In fact, during the Depression, he made more money performing, believe it or not, than working in the factory. And my mother, in those days, wives did not work. They stayed home, took care of the kids. They made dinner. They took care, they made the beds, whatever. Anyway, my mother also had played piano, maybe a year or so piano, and played enough just to get by. But we came from, as I said, a musical family in the fact that they always encouraged us to perform one way or another, any instrument we wanted. So my mom tried to teach me the piano. I think she gave me one lesson, and I think that was enough with my mother. And it's very difficult for anyone to study with their parents. It just doesn't work. So I took one lesson with her, and I kind of, snuck out the door and went to play baseball. But after a period of time, maybe 6 months or so, my father got a hold of me, and somehow I ended up on the mandolin playing. And he and I, we went for about 3 months. And keep in mind, we're talking 1947 or 48, whatever year it was. And the banjo was still popular in those days. And I studied with him. We had lessons, and I did okay. But somehow I managed to avoid working with him anymore either. I continued with my sports. That was more important. Well, one day my mother saw me, says, she still wanted me to play something. She says, Lou, my nickname then was Jeej. She says, do you like the way your cousin Tony plays the accordion? I said, he's okay, fine. It's fine, yeah, it's okay. She said, well, how would you like to take lessons? I don't know about taking lessons. I mean, She said, I'll tell you what, why don't you take lessons for a month? And if you don't like it after a month, I won't ask you anymore. Well, right away, boom, that brightened up, because all I had to do was 1 month. I can endure 1 month, and then I'm free, because she said she wouldn't bother me anymore about learning lessons. So I said, okay. Well, lo and behold, she makes the arrangements. And, you have to be lucky to a certain extent, because she contacted perhaps the finest teacher in the area, Rudy Molinaro. And in those days, he came to the house. So I remember him coming to the house with his 12-bass accordion in his hand, and hello, how are you? Fine, this is an accordion, this is how it works. And I started.
How old were you?
I was almost 11, actually. I was 1 month shy of 11, April 10th, 1948, I think it was, or something in that area. You remember certain dates. And I started, he told me do this, and I did it. And then next week, we did the next thing. And next week, we did that. Before you know it, I was going. I never stopped. It just kept kept going. I was like, I had an assignment to do. I'll do it. It was like doing a math homework, English homework, history homework. You have an assignment, you do it, you know. Whether you like it or not, you do it. It was like a school subject. So basically, that was it. I started and then kept going. I never stopped.
Were you having fun with it?
I didn't hate it. It was challenging. It was interesting that I was able to make, oh, look, I press a button here and I make music. And I guess I did okay. So I kept going, and he was quite happy with my progress. And we kept going. And I guess what turned things around that I really became interested in the accordion was when I went to a national accordion contest. I went to my first national contest. I was 13 years old. In those days, they had a division that was 13, 14, 15. They all combined them. And I was 13 years old, and I went in my very first contest, and I won second place in the national. I was like, wow. And we're talking competing against 25 people at a time. So I was quite impressed that I was able to do that.
Do you remember what song you played?
Yeah, I played the Polonaise Militaire by Chopin.
At 13?
At 13, yes. Now, it's interesting how it goes, because some years you do well and some years you don't. At age 14, I competed again, and I think I played the William Tell Overture, but I didn't win. So, fine, you know, so be it. But the next year, I was 15 years old, and I competed in the National Open division. No, I competed in my own division, and I'm not sure whether I came in second or I didn't come in at all. And the dates, I'm a little confused between 14 and 15. But I did compete in the what they call the Open in those days, where no age limit. I was 15 years old. This was 1952. And I won second place. And it was like, wow, you know, I'm sorry, I won first place. I have to go back and check these out now, but it was either second or first. I think I won first place in that division.
What song?
It was a Mendelssohn Violin Concerto, third movement. And then in 1953, we had another contest, and that was in New York. And I played a concerto by Darrow. And I won first place in that one. That was my second. And that November, in those days, sometimes we had two national contests in a year. So in 1953, I also won up in November in Boston. The one in July was in Chicago. National contest in Chicago in July. And then we had one in November. So the three national contests that I won, one was in New York, one in Chicago, and then in Boston again. And after I won the third one, I was 16 years old. And at that point, it was like, not that why compete, but I won already, so, you know, stop competing, quit while you're ahead. And it worked out fine. You know, I still played, and I was concertizing then. I was concertizing, going as a guest artist in various studios. In those days, the accordion was big. Studios had 100 students, 200 students. And they would present these recitals where all the children would play for maybe an hour and a half, little groups, ensembles, and then they would bring in a guest artist. And I was a guest artist. I was 17 years old at that time, 17, 18. And I'd come in, and I didn't, you know, go to Brooklyn and play for that school, Waterbury, Connecticut, Syracuse, New York, somewhere in New Jersey, you know, things of this nature where I would actually be the guest artist. So at the end of the recital, I would come on and play for maybe 15 to 20 minutes. And that's what they did in those days. And so I was doing okay, you know.
Was this a paid gig?
Yes. I don't know, but I think it paid like $75, which was a lot of money in those days, you know.
So you were making money playing the accordion
yes.
at 17?
Yeah. Yes. And so I guess my interest really, at that point, it was like, you know, I think I would like to make this a career. I was very much interested. And in those days, dummy me, I thought I was going to be playing the solo accordion on Carnegie Hall. Like, you know, I'm going to be performing in Carnegie Hall. Well, little did I know a couple of things. Number one, the accordion itself went downhill after the 70s, gradually. And that, the reason it went downhill, I'm a little bit ahead of myself right now, but the reason it went downhill was because of the Elvis Presley arrival with the guitar. And then, of course, the thing that really killed the accordion, and it was gradual. It didn't really hit bottom until late 70s, maybe early 80s. As far as the popularity of the accordion in this country, was the Beatles. When they came to this country, everybody loved guitar. In fact, when I was studying, the accordion was more popular than the guitar. We sold more accordions, I say we, the United States sold more accordions than they did guitars in the early 50s. But with the arrival of the Beatles and Elvis Presley, excuse me, the accordion's popularity went downhill.
There's water if you want to drink.
I do. Coming down with a little cold.
As far as growing up with the accordion, when you attending elementary school and
Yes.
stuff, were you unique in that aspect, or were there a lot of
I don't think I ever took my accordion to school.
no talent show or nothing?
No. In fact, I think when I got to high school, I did play a couple of things for them, but nothing serious. It was just I was on my own, doing my own thing. So, nevertheless, the accordion was extremely popular. Okay, we're talking now 1954. It was extremely popular. The accordion was still popular when I was studying. And so, you know, you're 17 years old, you're a senior in high school, you don't know what you want to do. So, I was like, what do you want to do? I don't know, you know, I should go to college. That sounds like the thing to do. So, we applied. The accordion was, well, that's the other thing. The accordion was not accepted by colleges. Hardly any college accepted the accordion. And I wanted to be an accordionist. I didn't want to be a history major. So we did some research, and we found out that the New England Conservatory of Music, well-respected conservatory, accepted the accordion. What I didn't know was that no one has actually gone there yet. So I applied. They accepted me. I received a scholarship. So, but at the same time, I've got this scholarship. It wasn't a full scholarship, but a partial scholarship to go. This must have been around the same time, maybe April, May of 1955 now. And we had a competition to send an accordionist to the World Accordion Contest, which is called the Coupe Mondiale. And it was being held in Brighton, England. And we had no idea what to expect, except my teacher said, oh, you should compete and try to go to the contest. So at that point, I became a competitor again. And you might say this was my fourth national champion, because I did enter in the contest. I was selected, fortunate enough to be selected, and I was the first person to represent the American Accordionists Association in the world contest, and that was in Brighton, England. Now, we had a problem with this, in fact, that the contest was, I think, the middle of September 19th, something of that nature. And I was supposed to be at New England Conservatory at the end of August. But I couldn't be in the conservatory and still be in England at the same time. So at the very last moment, I decided that, you know, really, I can't go back and start college after missing the first 4 or 5 weeks of the school. So I said, I postponed that. I said, I just won't do it this year. So we canceled that, and I put full attention to the world contest. Didn't win the contest. I came in 7th, but it was the United States' first experience in a world contest. We had no idea. There were so many things that, for instance, in those days, you submitted your selection that you were going to play, and it was graded 1 to 10. So if you got 10 on your piece, you already had 10 points. if you got an 8, you lost 2 points without even playing a note. We had no idea what we were doing. We picked a piece. It was challenging, but they only gave it a 7. So when I went to the World Contest, I lost 3 points before I even played my first note.
What piece was it?
It was the introduction in Rondo Capriccioso by Saint-Saëns. It was a wonderful piece, but there were other pieces that were harder. I guess I could have played. We had no idea that you would be rated on your selection. And when you consider that, I think it was 2.5 to 3 points separated the first 8 people in the contest, I was doomed before I began. It was very close. So, but we in the United States learned. We had no idea. Like, wait a minute, what happened here? And it was our first time. I was the guinea pig. So since that time, then we learned that you had to pick a harder selection to perform. Luckily, in future years, they eliminated the grading of the music. Yeah, it was, in other words,
Graded just on style.
yeah, you how well you do play it, you know. You can take a simple piece and play it beautifully. You can take a hard piece and not play it beautifully. So
If you came in 7th after getting graded off 3 points, you must have done really well.
I did. In fact, it was interesting. The Swedish magazine, the Swedish accordion magazine, in that day wrote a big article that Coppola should have won the World Contest, and they were very upset. And in fact, a lot of people were upset with the gradings and how they worked it. You know, I was 18, what was I, 17 or 18 years old at the time, and you know, I just played. That's all I was interested at the time.
Was this the first time you had been out of the country?
Yes, that was my first time out of the country.
How was your trip over?
It was interesting. I went with Pietro Darrow Jr. He was the representative of the AAA, and he and I went together. And of course, you know, I was a young boy. I really, yeah.
Boat or plane or?
Oh no, we went by plane. TWA, 3 wings in the back, you know, 4 motors, and off we went. It's Constellation, that's what they call them. It's TWA Super Constellation. And it was great. We had a good time. I didn't know what to expect.
Did the AAA pay for all this?
No, that's the other thing. They gave me. I think they paid. Let's see. I think they paid maybe $400. $400 rings a bell. Now, $400 in those days. Just turned that off. Time out. Little Tchaikovsky. Just press the top button. Turn it off. So, $400 I think covered the airfare. Just covered the airfare, and I don't know if they put us. I think they paid the rooms over there. So.
I bet your mom was excited.
Oh, she was. Yeah. It was a wonderful, wonderful time. But anyway, after I got back, I'm sorry. Let me back up. Before that, I gave a recital. This would have been April 17th, 1955. I gave a 2-hour recital myself. This was my coming out party, as my teacher called it. It was in a hotel in Bridgeport, and we invited many of the fine artists in the accordion industry came to this concert. This was prior to going to England. And I look back now at the program that I did, and I must have been crazy. I mean, I did it, and everything went well, I must say. Unfortunately, in those days, we didn't have the fine video and audio capacity that we have today. And I have a very distorted copy of my performance. It's my, I must say it was quite good. I don't know, I was at my peak, I think, at that time.
Why do you say you were crazy? Was it just?
Well, I mean, I look at it now, and I'd be afraid to attempt 1 or 2 of those. Never mind all 18 or 20 selections that I played. You know, I mean, it scares me now. I wouldn't know what to do with it. But then I looked and I said, I don't believe I played all this. You know, years later, you look back at it. So I was okay, I guess, in those days. So anyway, after that, The year was gone with the college, and I ended up teaching for my teacher. In those days, again, the accordion was popular. Students were coming in left and right. And I was working, maybe teaching 20 students a week, plus still doing my practicing. And when you talk about practicing, people say, oh, you're so talented. You're so talented. Yes, you're very talented when you practice 5, 6, 7 hours a day. You see? It doesn't just come. It didn't come to me anyway. And during the summer, when we were out of school, several of us used to go down to my teacher's place of business, and he had a whole floor above him, but it was just like an attic, but it was a former ballroom or whatever. And we would get there and we would practice. We'd go down, start practicing at 9 o'clock in the morning, take a break for lunch, come back and practice again from maybe 1 to 4. And we did that for the entire summer. So yes, you will get good if you practice.
Accordion camp.
Basically, yes, yes. So I taught for him, and I was still concertizing for schools, like I mentioned earlier, accordion schools, and they would need a guest artist, and I'd go.
You're 17?
I was 18 at the time. And then that went on for the year, and I guess that's probably maybe the summer or early fall of '56. My teacher got a call from Pedro Darrow Jr. He was Lee Darrow, we called him. And Lee said that the Air Force Band, he had made contact with Colonel Howard, who was our commander. And Colonel Howard was looking for an accordionist. So how it got back to me was, my teacher said, Rudy said, the Air Force Band has an opening for an accordionist, and I think you might be interested in it. And of course, I had no idea what the Air Force Band was, except I heard them perform one time. They came to Bridgeport and performed in a concert, and I was like, wow, are they ever good, you know? And they had, I remember a vocalist who really knocked me out singing with them, like, they are just fantastic, the Air Force Band. And I wasn't exposed to too many musical organizations, okay, on the outside. We didn't have YouTube. We didn't have TV. We had one TV with maybe 3 stations in those days. So I remember listening to Toscanini, though. I remember he was on TV, and I was very impressed with Toscanini conducting the NBC Symphony Orchestra. I was exposed a little bit to music, but not that much live music. When I was growing up, I don't think I ever went to a restaurant. It was always my mother made dinner. I mean, my exposure to a restaurant was during the summertime. We'd be driving back from the local beach, and we'd stop and have a hot dog. That was my exposure to the outside restaurant. And later on, when I was in high school, studying at Rudy's and practicing during the summer, we'd go to a lunch counter, and we'd bring our own sandwich and eat and buy a Coke or something. But so I never really went out much and wasn't exposed to all these different restaurants that other people are nowadays. So he says, back to the call, he says, I think you would like it. He says, you get to play solos with the Air Force Band, and you travel in the finest hotels in the world. Ha, ha, ha. So all I have in my mind is hearing the Air Force Band perform in Bridgeport, Connecticut, and I was like overwhelmed with the quality of their performance. So he says, go do it. All right, what would I know? I'm thinking I'm going to run a big music school during my life, and then concertize and be performing, as I said earlier, in Carnegie Hall. Ha, ha, ha. Those things don't work that way. So I went down. I got down a day early, and I practiced and went in a hotel room, and I practiced and I practiced and I practiced. And it came time for the audition. I went in, and we had another accordionist also with the band at the time. And he was getting out of the Air Force in about a year or so, so they were trying to work a replacement deal. So I get down there, and the captain who auditioned me said, well, go ahead and play. So I start playing, I think one of the concertos by Pedro Darrow. And I start playing. I got into about 2 minutes of it. I'm playing away, you know. And he says, oh, that's fine. That's very good. And I thought, you know, why don't you want to hear the rest of this? You know, like I came from Bridgeport, Connecticut, 5 hours away by train, came a day early, and I get into performing for you, and I play 2 minutes, and you stop me. Does that mean I'm going home? You don't want me, or what? And he says, no, that was fine. Then he says, do you play anything light? Well, I didn't know what he meant by light. I think what he meant was popular and jazz. I suppose I can play something like Fiddle Faddle. Fiddle Faddle is not light, but it's lighter than what I was playing. So I start playing Fiddle Faddle. I get about 2 minutes into that, and he says, whoa, that's fine. I said, it is? He says, yeah. And he says to me, I assume you know how to read music. I said, yeah, of course. He said, okay, you're accepted. And that was it. I had a 5-minute audition. And they, just like that, I mean, I guess they recognized. And the accordionist that was in also knew of me, and he said, he was just, but I guess they had to go through the.
You got a recommendation from him?
Yeah, I'm sure I did. So then, you went through basic training. Oh, that was the other thing. They said, oh, we need you to enter the service now, the recruiter. He said, this way you'll be home by Christmas, because it was October. And I said, he said, no, he said, we just got the notice that if you enter the service now, you'll be out of training. We all had to go to basic training, even though we were assigned to the Air Force Band. And that's the other thing. After we passed the audition, we get a letter saying that upon completion of basic training, we would be assigned to the Air Force Band. So even though we were civilians, we had a letter saying this was our assignment. It was a special assignment to the Air Force Band. So I said, okay, fine. I'll join the service now. I was thinking I'll join it in January. So he said, no, you got to go now. So you'll be home by Christmas. Well, it didn't quite happen that way.
That makes sense.
Yeah,
If you waited till
this is
January, you would have been home.
That's right. That's right. So I think I got home for Christmas on January 12th. Okay, but it's the beginning of the stories of how things were going to be. So anyway, finished that. I had no idea what I was going to be doing with the Air Force Band. All I knew at that time was I'm assigned to the Air Force Band. Okay. I figured I'd be playing solos with the band. Well, like I mentioned earlier, the other accordionist was playing solos with the band. I get down, I walk in there, our orderly room where all the offices are, and the first thing I see is a sheet on the bulletin board saying there's a White House performance, and there's my name on it in 2 days. And I'm saying, wait a minute, I don't even know what I'm doing. I just got here, you know. Well, it turns out my name was just on it, and it wasn't checked off that I was performing, but they already had my name as being on the roster. So I found out at that time that I was going to be performing as the accordionist with the Strolling Strings, Air Force Strolling Strings. That was my first knowledge of what I was going to be doing in the Air Force. And so that was it. So we had a violinist. We had no music, no accordion music, and we sort of started from scratch. We started from scratch, and it was like, do you know this piece? Oh yeah, I know that piece. Okay, we'll play that one. And they give me a violin part, and he write the chords for me. And the accordion parts just evolved. Luckily, the violinist that I was working with, he had a wonderful understanding of the accordion and how he wanted it to be worked with the violin. So he did most of the arrangements when I first got there. So we had enough to get it started. And then it began, okay?
Talk about playing by the seat of your pants.
Exactly. It was like, oh, okay. And do you know this music? Oh, yeah, right. So, okay, where are we? So I'm in, and then we start traveling. What we did is we played for Well, the Air Force Strolling Strings, its main function was to be available to play at the White House for state dinners. And we also traveled, played high-level functions locally for Chief of Staff, Chairman and Joint Chief of Staff, State Department, and just general Air Force and military functions. We did a lot of traveling. In fact, 1960 and 61, we traveled over 100 days a year. And that's a lot. And our trips weren't, we didn't go out for 2 or 3 weeks at a time and come back. We went out for, we would leave on Monday, we'll say, and we would go to somewhere out in the West Coast. We'd leave on a Monday, get out there because of the time change, maybe 4 o'clock in the afternoon, play an engagement that evening, and turn around the next day and fly back. And we didn't have the jets in 1960 that we have today. So we had prop airplanes, many of them non-pressurized, and it would take us maybe 7 or 8 hours to get there, and then the next day fly back home 7, 8 hours. We couldn't fly at 40,000 feet like the planes flew now because the planes weren't pressurized in those days. And we would fly at 10, 11,000, and if there was a storm, it would be a little bumpy ride.
I would think that would be kind of rough on the instrument. Did you ever have any problems with the accordion?
No, mainly because, well, the good news when we travel is we had our instruments with us. We had, even when we traveled with seats, I mean, I say with seats, many of our planes were what they call bucket seats along the side, cargo airplanes. We sat on the side and our instruments would be right in the middle of the aisle. But even when we flew airplanes later on, that the Air Force modernized, we even got jets. And if we flew on an airplane, we always requested 6 seats for instruments. And we would wedge the accordion on the floor, the cellos up on the accordion reach. And we had a crew that knew how to pack it. The bass, upright bass. So we always had seats. Some of the crews that we traveled with, they would say, what's this? You have 18 passengers or 20 passengers, and you're asking for 27 seats. Why is that? Well, we need it for the instruments. What do you mean you need it for the instruments, you know? I had no concept of the value of the instruments. But we had our own people who knew how to put the instruments in and secure them. And it worked out. It worked out very well.
So you didn't have a designated jet for the
No, we did not. It was whatever jet was available, whatever airplane was available. It varied over the years. In the beginning years, if let's say a base down in San Antonio wanted us to come and perform, it was their responsibility to get that airplane to us. They would fly their own airplane up to get us and bring us back. Okay.
All this traveling and stuff, how did you meet Rosemary?
Oh, good question. Rosemary and I studied with Rudy in Connecticut. So we knew each other from when we were young kids. And that's right, we never got to that part yet. Yeah, we studied together. She actually studied before me, I think, and so we knew each other and we played with each other, but it was strictly students. And then as we got older, our musical relationship also turned into a personal relationship. And after I entered the service, I entered the service in October of '56. In September of '59, we married. And then she came down here, and later on, while we were together, accordion was very popular, still popular, and people were studying. So they would, in the beginning, I was doing the teaching, and then if I went TDY somewhere, she would step in and take the students for that week. So, in some respects, it was great for the students because maybe I would approach it one way, okay? Like, all right, watch your fingering here, and she might say, oh, let's work on the left hand. So she was taking it from a different angle. Since we both studied with the same teacher, we had the same concept. But some days she may have said, okay, I think you ought to try this, and I would say this. So it was good that she was there because we had two different approaches to how to play.
And that started in '69?
59.
Oh,
59. 59.
Well, y'all did that for a while because I studied in '74 and
Oh,
you were
yes.
still doing that because she taught me a couple times.
Oh, yes, 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 exactly. And then she, in 74, you were at, did you study with me in Suitland or was it in Fort Washington? Do we have the modern home at that time? Or
Yeah, you took me on a tour and you had big double French doors coming out.
Yes.
Your bedroom on on the
Yes,
balcony.
yes, yes, yes.
Is that Suitland?
No, that was Piscataway.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah. But anyway, we start teaching, okay? I mean, I was in the Air Force, but then I had enough time to teach a little bit, and I did. And in between teaching and performing and whatever, we were able to work it out so that even if I had to travel, she was able to fill in for me for most of the time. And later on, she started doing her own students, and I was doing my students. Of course, we had a family in time. Kevin came along in '61, and in 1963, our other son, John, was born. So she became a mother and part-time teacher in those days.
When did you start teaching your kids the accordion?
Oh, well, Kevin started when I think he was 5. Okay, he kind of took to it quite well, and he was 5 years old. I normally say, if you're going to study, wait until 7 because you don't advance that much at age 5, at age 6. But usually by age 7, it's a good age to start. I've always felt that 7 was a good time to start. So, but with Kevin, he caught on right away. So I felt at age 5 he was ready. So I started him at age 5, and fortunately, I was able to teach both of my students. Kevin went on to become a national champion, and in his age level, which was 16, and he also became a jazz champion on the accordion. And John, although John didn't play the accordion as long as Kevin did, John started probably when he was around 7, and he also won. I think his last contest was when he was like 13, 14. So, speaking of the kids, what happened after that? I mean, Kevin played right through high school. Then, upon graduation of high school, Kevin ended up going to Northwestern University in Chicago, Evanston, Illinois, and majored in computer science. And he did pretty well since he was #1 in his class when he graduated. So Kevin went on to another career at that point.
What year did he win the national contest?
Well, he would have been 16, 17, I would say 1976 maybe?
Okay, he was still in high school?
Yeah, let's see, 70 something. Yeah, he was in high school till 78.
Okay.
Yeah, so maybe 77. Somewhere in that,
Okay.
close enough. And John was like 13 when he, also around that same time frame, because they're almost 3 years apart. But John had other ideas. The accordion was there. I think he studied because I told him he was going to study. Okay? Kevin kind of went along with it, but John had other ideas. So John wanted to play the bass, and he ended up, that's what he did. After, I guess he was 14, 15 years old, maybe 16, I don't know. He switched off and played bass. And as you saw him yesterday at Gaylord playing bass, that's what he does now. He plays bass with, he played bass with his mom, and he played bass with my group. But he also, his real love is to play blues and rock groups, small groups that play in these little restaurants and nightclubs. And if he had his way, that's what he would do.
Do the boys pick up the accordion every now and then?
No.
Really? Not even Kevin.
No, but it was interesting. A few years ago, I went to Chicago, and I says, Kevin. Kevin now has 2 children. And I should say I have 2 grandchildren. Kyle, who is now 18, and a freshman at the University of Denver, and Lucy, who's 13. And his kids never heard him play the accordion. So one day, when I was out there, we got the accordion out, and he hadn't played for maybe, I don't know, 4 years, 5 years. He picks up the accordion and he starts playing like he never stopped. I was amazed. Like, Kevin, you got to pick this up more often. I mean, he impressed me. Now, I'm not saying that because he's my son, but John was more into the bass, and hopefully the accordion helped them establish a good foundation for what he's doing.
When your grandkids heard him play, were they interested in playing the accordion?
No, I don't think so. I think they were impressed, like, wow, look at Dad do that, And, the kids growing up today, they have so many activities. Whether it's ballet and soccer. I mean, they're busy all the time doing something. So both my grandchildren did play the piano. And my Kyle went on to play saxophone, switched to saxophone, and played with there's a school in Wilmette. It's called New Trier High School. It's probably one of the finest schools in the country, high school-wise. And Kyle played baritone sax in their dance band. And let me tell you something, their band was better than most college bands. They were outstanding. And Kyle did play baritone sax with them for 3 or 4 years. So, and Lucy is on and off playing piano. Plays piano, and then she doesn't play piano, and she plays piano, and she's still at that age where, I could do something else, Dad, instead of playing the piano. But Dad is still after her, trying to keep her busy playing the piano.
When you knew you were starting to retire from the strolling strings, how did you transition into stereo strings? And was that your idea?
Yeah. Well, let's back it up. Let's go back to where did we leave off? We were talking about traveling. Let's talk about that, and then we'll get to that.
Okay.
In my career, I put in 28 and a half years. Okay. I retired as Chief Master Sergeant, which is the highest rank that any musician can attain in the music field.
How do they do promotions for musicians?
When I came in, they were just like anybody who was in the Air Force. It was interesting. When I joined, it was you put in so many months as a E1, E2, a year and a half, and so on. But members of the concert band, the strings were not looked upon very favorably in those days. We were the orphan children of the band. But the people in the concert band, they received the promotion to E5 at the time, within 3 months. Nowadays, everyone in the premier bands are the ones, United States Marine Band, Air Force Band, Navy Band, and Army Band. The 4 premier bands are all located here in Washington, D.C. Everyone coming into the music program that's good enough to get in, they are promoted. They come in as an E6 immediately now. So they come as E6. They may stay E6 for many years, but they do come in as an E6. So that's the one advantage they have joining the military bands. Some people almost go through a whole career as an E6 because the people come in and then they stay. So there's no openings after that. So they come as an E6. They have to wait for somebody to retire before they can. So, but now.
Did you have to test?
No, not. It was based on your musical ability in those when I came in. Okay. basically, if you can make the audition, you're good enough. Okay. As an example, I think last year somebody said that the Marine Band. I know this because of people telling me. The Marine Band had an opening for clarinet. And what they have to do is they send in a tape. People listen to this tape. And they say, yes, you're eligible to come back and audition in person. Or, sorry, thank you, no. Thank you, try again some other time. Well, anyway, they narrowed it down to 50. Okay? One opening, Marine Band. And then they would come in and they would audition. So you can imagine the quality of the musicians.
Right.
Yeah. So you're a quality player once you're in. Okay.
So it's just time and service then.
Time and service and how well you do and the job you're doing. Okay. Yes, you were good enough to get in, but now what are you going to do? What can you do? Can you show us leadership ability? Whatever.
Okay.
So now in the Air Force anyway, Air Force Band, they do have to go to school. They have various schools that they go to. They go to an E6 school, E7 school, E8 school, E9 school, non-commissioned officer school for this or that. So they do have to do that, and they do have some testing that they have to do to be eligible for promotion. But then they're promoted within the organization. They have so many slots, so many E9s, so many E8s, and then if you can be an E7 waiting for a promotion, but if you're E8 and you're not going to retire for 5 or 6 years, that person below you is just not going to get promoted. So it has an advantage of coming into the military band as an E6, but you could be stuck there for a long time. But it's still better than what it was.
Travel, see the world.
Yeah. Now, the Air Force Strolling Strings, I should say with the Air Force Strolling Strings, during my career, I ended up playing for 9 presidents. Actually, the first president I played for was President Eisenhower. It was the very first time I played in the White House, and it was his last party that he was given. And what we would do is we would perform in the state dining room, which was here. Then we had a hallway, and then the East room where there'd be a music hall. So they would have dinner, walk the hallway, and go into the music hall. We would come in and perform, not always, but this would be a typical performance at the White House. We would perform for 7 minutes. They were very insistent it'd be 7 minutes. Perform for 7 minutes. So we had to get our music, make sure they timed it down that when they served dessert, the strings would come on 7 minutes. By that time, they would take another minute. The president would get up, make a toast, and then they would, after dinner, they'd come through the hallway, go into the state dining room. Well, our very first time there for the Eisenhowers, I don't think it was a dinner. It may have been just a reception. But we lined the hallway, and they were in the red room, the East room, the other room, green room. And we were playing. The music went through. They could hear because the doors were open and everything else. And out of a clear blue sky, here comes Mamie and Ike Eisenhower out into the hallway. There was a little stool in front of us. And the two of them are sitting there. Only the two of them, and we're playing. You know, they maybe they're entertaining 200 people, but just the two of them came out in the hall. And they're looking, and Mamie's looks at Ike and says, why didn't we have these people here before? You know, she really enjoyed what we were doing. And I guess they didn't know we existed. We were still in our infancy at that time. So that was my first and only performance for President Eisenhower. Then I ended up playing for President Truman. I include him on the list. I didn't play for him. I was too young, of course, but I didn't play for him when he was in office. But during the Kennedy administration, he came back and they honored him at a state dinner honoring President Truman. So I ended up playing for President Truman. The Air Force Strolling Strings did. So I count him as my second president. And then President Kennedy was the one that we played mostly for, and that's where we received most of our attention performing. Some people refer to us as the darlings of the White House because the President and Mrs. Kennedy really enjoyed the Air Force Strolling Strings. They really enjoyed us. And a couple of interesting things happened. One time we were playing a state dinner. Keep in mind, we're only having 7 minutes, right? So we're in there performing, and Mrs. Kennedy calls one of our violinists over while we're performing. He says, play Ochaturnia, which is dark ice. Well, we don't have dark ice. We didn't do dark ice. And he didn't know what to do. He came up to our lead violinist. Keep in mind, the violinists are spread across the dining room, and the center group, which was accordion, violin, bass at the time, we're up in the corner by the doorway, and he comes up, Mrs. Kennedy wants to hear Ochaturnia. And like, we don't know it, what are we going to do? So I remembered it because I had played Dark Ice, and I think I was able to get through it. I said, I can get through it. She says, our lead violinist says, play it. So I played, dun, 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 and here it is, I know practicing, I just played it. But it was just music, and it took about 3 minutes. And Mrs. Kennedy says, no, I meant for all of you to play it, which, fine. The next morning, I gave that music to my lead violinist, and he made an arrangement. And you can bet your life, the next time we played the White House, which was probably in a week, we played Ochaturnia with everybody because she requested it. So that was one experience. Another time, I will say this. What happened is, upon the conclusion of our performance, which usually was play 7 minutes and then line the hallway. So as the guests went from the dining room to the musicale, which would be people such as Pablo Casals, Isaac Stern, Leonard Bernstein, who would perform, we would play them into there. That would be another 5-10 minutes. And then upon the conclusion of the musicale, as they were leaving, we lined the other side of the hallway as they left. So that was our job. But when we finished, the people at the White House were always so kind. They always gave us a treat. Our treat was champagne and ice cream. They always gave us ice cream and champagne. And we would sit in the dining room after the guests left, and that would be our treat. They would take care of us. In those days, we didn't have the security as we have nowadays. Nowadays, you can't get anywhere near the White House. But when I went, I used to drive right to the gate, right there where the policemen are, and I parked the car. I'd walk in, say, hi, I'm with the Air Force. Yeah, sure, go ahead in. Go in, no security at all. I mean.
Lou, I've got about 7 minutes left on this.
Okay.
But I do want to hear about Leonard Bernstein.
Okay. One day, I guess it was Isaac Stern, was a guest, I think, at the White House. And President and Mrs. Kennedy went upstairs in private quarters with Isaac Stern, his wife, Leonard Bernstein and his wife. And we were downstairs having our ice cream and champagne. And all of a sudden, we get a call from the president, from upstairs. The president would like to know if you would come up and play, a few of you. Well, 4 of us went upstairs, and we start playing. And Mrs. Kennedy came up to the group, and we were in a corner, and she said to us, it was the first time I ever heard her talk, and she had an unusual voice, if you're not familiar with her. And she said, well, John is sleeping over here, and Caroline's here, so if you would play quietly, I'd appreciate it. No problem. So we're playing quietly. This is now 11:30, 12 o'clock, 12:30, and we're playing away. Well, they're ready to leave finally. Great. And what happens is, Isaac Stern's feeling no pain. He's drinking away, hey, you guys are playing, yeah. And he starts coming over and he grabs one of our violinists' violin, and we start playing. And all of a sudden, what was very quiet became noisy. And then there's a piano right next to us, and Leonard Bernstein sits down to the piano. You have a picture of that, I think. And here's Leonard Bernstein and Isaac Stern, and we're playing a selection. And then our violinist, the same one who did the arrangements, very outspoken. He'd speak to anybody. He said, we have an accordionist who can play the Mendelssohn Violin Concerto. Well, I'm like, here I am with Isaac Stern, Leonard Bernstein. It's 1 o'clock in the morning. I hadn't played this piece in maybe 3 months because I've been concentrating on strolling music. And he's in front of me, and I'm kicking him in the back of his foot. I'm kicking him, going, quiet, Charlie, shut up, Charlie, you know, well, as soft as I could, just so that he could hear me. And the president's there, Mrs. Kennedy's there, Isaac Stern, Leonard Bernstein. So, sure, let's play it. So we ended up performing a movement that luckily was a movement I knew. Excuse me, the third movement, a Mendelssohn Violin Concerto. And we played. And here it is, Isaac Stern, Lou Coppola, and Leonard Bernstein performing. And we got into about a minute and so, and the president finally said, okay, that's enough, you know, let's go home type thing. And in the meantime, here's Jackie Kennedy taking pictures, and she took a picture of the three of us performing, which you have. And she also took a picture with the president, but we never got that picture. I only got the other one.
Were they impressed with you?
Oh, Mrs. Kennedy would track us. If we had a state dinner, one time we were in Colorado and we were coming back, and we were in the airplane. So the White House wanted to know where we were, you know, in flight, what time we were back, because Mrs. Kennedy was checking up that we get back in time to perform. And another time we had to perform a state dinner. We were in a snowstorm, stuck in Chicago, and they said, well, we can't fool around, even though the weather looks good for tomorrow. They put us on a train, make sure, because when the Kennedys wanted us, we had to be there, ready to go, ready to be playing. The only other Kennedy incident that I'll mention is back in, this is 1962 now, and we used to go to Bermuda. And one of the main, well, not the main reason, but we went there to entertain. But one of the advantages of going to Bermuda, we'd be able to buy booze, liquor for next to nothing. You buy a bottle of liquor for $1 that's, you know, so military went there, customs people always looked the other way, and there was no problem. Okay, you could take whatever you want. Well, when we went this one time, and we took footlockers full of music, or that's what it said on the box, the footlockers, but had a few other things in there, like some scotch and bourbon and other things. So we had one person in our group, a violinist, who was very concerned about it. And he wrote a letter to our captain at the time saying, I'm against this, I'm morally against this. And when we went to Bermuda, he wasn't on the trip, but he wrote a letter to customs saying they're going to be there on a liquor run, basically. And customs had no choice but to then come in. And well, we got surrounded when we landed, and we landed on a Monday at 4 o'clock, I think, and at 6:30, we are on Huntley Brinkley, you know. The entertaining group that entertains the president was involved. I mean, they made a big deal over it. We were on the front, we had a tabloid paper here in Washington at the time, Evening Star, I think, or News. You know, it was like Air Force plane raided, you know, headlines like this. Well, anyway, it all worked out in the end. People got fined, but then they never ended up paying their fines. But we made the headlines. We made the newspapers. Page 3 of the Washington Post.
Not exactly good publicity.
No, no. Well, we had, our chief of staff of the Air Force at the time was Kurt LeMay. And if you knew Kurt LeMay, he's always smoking a cigar and had the most sour-looking face in the world. Well, we're at the White House 2 days later, and there's Kurt LeMay. Of all things, he's a guest at the White House. And he's smoking a cigar, and he's walking down, not even looking at us. And then everyone's coming by, and they're pointing like, those are them. They're the ones. They're the ones. And even though we were performing, it was almost like there was silence in the air, because everybody knew we were the ones. We were the
criminals.
That's exactly right. So what happens? Here comes President Kennedy. He breaks ranks from walking into the state dining room or state room where they were having the musicale, East Room, I guess it was. And he comes up to us and he said to our violinist at the time, he says, I see they let you out tonight. And he kind of broke the ice just like that. And you know, the violinist was standing right next to me. He says, "Yes, yes, sir." You know, and he said, "Sincerely, I hope everything will be okay with you." And he said, "I'm sure it will be." He says, "Good." And then he walked back. But I mean, it was so nice of the President of the United States to come up and talk to us.